My name is Fernando Aranda. This is my sophomore project for Mr. Wade, period 2. And I want to talk about my experience with my dad on Wednesday, which is recently this last Wednesday. He suffered from having his nose bleeding constantly for over an hour or two, and it wouldn't stop. And we went to my mom took him to the doctor's, the emergency room, because he wouldn't stop bleeding, and the doctors would tell him that it's normal for him to bleed, and nosebleeds are normal. But when he came back to the house, he just kept bleeding, and it wouldn't stop. So my mom took him the next day, Thursday, to get it checked out again from 2 different emergency rooms, and the doctors told him the same thing, that it's normal, that it should stop. But it never did. It would constantly just keep bleeding. But on Friday, 2 days ago, because by the way, I'm recording this on Sunday, and Friday, 2 days ago, my mom took him to another emergency room, and the doctors told him that it was like something serious, because they've never seen a nosebleed like this, and they didn't know what it was, so they didn't know how to treat him with his nose. But my mom took him to the emergency room, and they didn't know how to treat him, and it also just messed up everything, because my dad, he's a really strong guy, and I look up to him, and it kind of hurt and broke me a little seeing him and how much he's suffering, because he looked really pale, and the doctors, they didn't know what it was. They just kept telling my mom and us, which is my siblings, that they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what it could be. So they made my mom go to Fontana at the Kaiser hospital over there, which is one of the main hospitals where there's a lot of doctors, the actual real doctors that could help with this type of stuff. And we went over there all the way to Fontana, and we got to the hospital. I got there after my mom did, because my mom had to take him. She had to leave work early, and she took him to the hospital over there in Fontana, and I got there after school. But it turns out that the doctors didn't know what it was, and they had to take up more than a few doctors to discuss about it and try to figure out what my dad's problem is. Why wouldn't he stop bleeding? And they hooked him up to everything. They got him settled in, they got him checked in, and my mom spent the night there. Me and my siblings came back home, and yesterday, they decided to do a surgery, which was to see what it was. So they did a surgery to stick it through his thigh, all the way up to his body, all the way up through his body, up to his brain, with a camera to see what it was, what the bleeding is. And they decided to cut the arteries to stop the bleeding, and it was a 3 to 4 hour surgery on Saturday at Kaiser Hospital. And when they finished with the surgery, it turns out it was pretty successful, because they didn't see any more blood come out. But he stayed the night there again last night, and it was pretty like crazy, because a bunch of relatives and friends and other family members that we aren't really close to all came to visit my dad, and it really meant a lot to him, because it showed how much people cared about him, and how much it really made him happy, because it showed all his loved ones and who was really there for him, and it was a lot. It was so much people, all of our relatives and friends, that we had to take up 2 waiting rooms for my dad. And he stayed the night because the doctors didn't let him come home with us last night, which was a smart idea, because they wanted to see how would he hold up. And my grandpa came, stayed with him all night. We came back home, me and my siblings, with my mother, and it just made me really upset and heartbroken, because my dad's always a strong guy. He would always help us with everything and be there for us, and the fact that I saw him weak and go through that stuff, which nobody should really go through, just made me really upset. And then the fact that there's a lot of people going through things at the hospitals, a lot of sick people with their families crying, and just trying to be there for them, really opened my eyes up and made me realize not to take things for granted, not to take family members for granted, or your loved ones, or anyone, because anyone who loves you shall always be respected and appreciated, because that's hard to find nowadays. And it just made me think back to everything my dad has done for me, and how I took some things for granted. And me and my dad never really got along, but I hope after this happens, after all this passes by, we really could build a strong connection. And that's my experience, but how I reflect on it was obviously, it just opened my eyes, what I said earlier. And it was really a hard thing to do, because I've never seen my dad I've never seen my dad weak. He's always shown us how strong he was, and the way he talked with all the blood in his mouth and on the verge of tears was just heartbreaking, because it really showed how much love he has for us as well. And personal the personal world perspective that I'm connecting this to would be formation of cultural and personal thought, because it I believe that all these people should really not take anyone or anything for granted.